Okay. So, hello everyone. I can wait a minute. It's a pleasure for me to introduce Sara Vitali to you. Sara is a finishing PhD student at the Universidad Diego Portales in Santiago de Chile. She's finishing her PhD in a few months. She did also an ISO studentship, so she did part of her PhD at ISO Chile, and that's where we met and where we started working together. And now she's been visiting me these couple of weeks. So she's going to be here until the end of the week, I think. So if you have questions after her seminar, you can find us. And I leave this for you.
Okay. So hi, everyone. So first of all, I would like to thank the IAC, Anna, her grant for allowing me to be here and present my work to you. So these are projects that I've been working on during my PhD. So before starting, I'd like to remind us that we are living in an era that is very exciting for doing galactic archaeology, and this is the field that I'm working with my PhD, because we are living in the area of the big data release from the large-scale spectroscopic survey, and as well as the data from space mission as Gaia. So the synergy between all this data is allowing us really to study and understand the history and evolution of our galaxy, to build a beautiful maps like this one, the very famous, where we can basically distinguish the metal-rich thin disk, the bulge mixed with the more metal-poor thin thick disk. So it's really like we can look into details into our galaxy, but we don't have to stop to the Milky Way, and with we can really also understand and study the different substructure that, for example, are forming our galaxy. And here there's an example of the work, 2 plots from the work of Horta et al., where we can see how in chemistry also we are able to distinguish 2 of the most important substructure that are interacting with our galaxy. So basically we can jump from studying the structure of inside the Milky Way, for example, distinguish the low alpha disk from the high alpha disk, to the studying the satellite. And basically, so galactic archaeology is kind to me as a collage between different type of study that we can all combine to trying to answer more general questions. So how our galaxy formed, evolved, how it interacts with other satellite and substructure. And so if galactic archaeology is kind of a collage also my PhD a little bit, and this is why I worked on very different projects. So for example, I had my studentship at ISO, where I worked more on chemical tagging. Then now I'm working with Anna and towards more single and chemical peculiar stars. And then there's the main project of my PhD that originally was on studying the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy and its chemical evolution. But all these projects, let's say, then have a common point, which is basically using chemistry and stellar spectroscopy to understand how our galaxy and the satellite evolved. And also, so I take the opportunity to thank all the people that helped me during my PhD, because this is like a work that I did with the support of many colleagues, collaborators, my supervisor. So before starting with the first project, here it's a very schematic and simplified view of like why we like to study chemical abundances and how they can help us. Because let's say when we look to a stellar spectrum and we derive chemistry, what we are doing in fact is to kind of look at fossil records to try to reconstruct the properties of the birth cloud from which the star or the stellar population have originated. So we know that after the Big Bang, we basically had only light elements. And from this so primordial gas composition, we had the first stars formed. These were very massive. They exploded. So very like on very short time scale, we cannot look at them. But what we can do is try to reconstruct through chemistry, like looking back in time, because when the stars exploded, they ejected into the interstellar medium the elements that they had time to synthesize thanks to nucleosynthesis processes. So basically, the next generation or next population of stars that formed through the ESM kind of have been enriched by the elements that were formed in the previous generation of stars. And so basically, we can study now chemistry of the stars that we can observe, and we can, thanks to spectroscopy, derive the properties of the previous generations. We can also, to do this, we have a variety of elements that we can use, and these are summarized here in the beautiful table of Kobayashi, and we like to group them in families. And when I'm talking about families is because there are elements that are formed with similar nucleosynthesis process. So basically, we have here, there's an example of an alpha element. I chose magnesium, but there are other, so that are the elements that are synthesized through into massive stars, and that they exploded through core collapse supernova. And the time scale, it's very short, and it is so this explosion took place early on time. And then we have the iron peak elements that are on the other ends released on very longer time scale through supernova type 1a. And there's also neutron capture elements that form through the capture of neutron to atomic nuclei. And this can take place, capture of neutron can take place on different time scale, slow or rapid. In fact, we divided these two families, and they can be produced both by asymptotic giant branch stars or like more exotic process like neutron star merger. And this is the case of rapid process elements. So we can combine all these properties, and we can try to, let's say, derive like kind of the history of the stellar population we are looking at. So an element that for sure we all like to use, it's iron. And iron, because we assume that iron has a very strict correlation with time, but we have to be also kind of cautious in just relying on the dependence on iron over time. In fact, if we look at this age metallicity relation that Nissen built with the solar twin stars, we can see that the age metallicity relation split into different sequence that, for example, here are tracing to accretion event of the disk stars that we are looking at this plot. So we have the inner and outer disk here. So the dependence of time or age of stars with iron is not so straightforward to interpret all the time. For this purpose, then we can use other chemical abundance ratio that have also a very strong dependence with time. So I just mentioned, for example, that the neutron capture elements or the slow neutron capture elements have an opposite times with respect with the alpha elements, because they are built on longer time scale compared to the alpha elements. So if we, for example, combine these two elements in a abundance ratio, then really we can kind of try to understand like the dependence of time on for these two group of elements. Chemistry, so can reveal us information about time or stellar age, but also we can use it to study, like characterize a galaxy. And here it's like one plot that I'm sure that most of you know. So it's the alpha elements, like where here is magnesium over iron. And for example, this plot already contains a lot of information, because when we look at the level of enrichment at lower metallicity, so at older time, the level of this ratio can already tell us something about the mass, the initial mass function of the galaxy. Higher is this ratio, higher would be the mass of the galaxy. And then the decline of this ratio, that basically means when supernova type 1a will overcome for collapse supernova, is revealing us information about the star formation rate of the galaxy, because this is what we call the knee, can happen at different metallicity. And happening at different metallicity, we can kind of derive the properties of the star formation history of the galaxy itself. This is a plot that was done for the Milky Way, but we can do the same for the satellites or for other dwarf system. And we can see how the same ratio tracing the different star formation history, because here there's the Milky Way, and here there are all the more massive dwarf system, and we can see really how this ratio varies from one system to the other. So now starting with my first project. So what I did was to use the dependence on time that I just mentioned to you of some chemical abundance ratio. These are also known, or we call them chemical clock. I call them chemical traits because I think they are not always like, then this will be one of my conclusion, like, but let's say that even if we know that these elements have a stronger relation with time, and for this reason they've been widely exploited during the years, we also know that there are many factors that affect the dependencies of these chemical elements with time or stellar age. So they are for sure powerful tool to derive stellar ages, and we use chemistry because we know that sometimes age can be a very difficult information to derive for stars. But these are some plots that I took from a literature that really show how these chemical traits depend on many factors. For example, in this work of Vasquez 2022, if we took two chemical ratio of S process over alpha, and we plot them with age, we can see that looking at different part of the galaxy, and we have the solar region in green, the inner region in blue, and the outer in pink, like these slopes change quite a lot. So they are not universal from a spatial point of view, but they're not even universal when we look at the metallicity of stars, because in the Feldzig showed us that when we look the yttrium over magnesium versus age, but we looked at this ratio for different stars with different metallicity, at a given age, we have a spread that is clearly dependent on the metallicity of the star itself. And also they have a dependence on the system that we are looking at, because here in the work of Skuladotir, we can see that these two ratios change when we look at the Milky Way in green, or we look at dwarf system, and here there's sculpture in blue and fornax in pink. So we want to ask ourselves to which extent we can use this chemical ratio to tagging or build a stellar dating for our galaxy. We tried to answer part of this question in a recent accepted paper, which the second author is Dite, that here in the public. So this was the paper that was released after the end of my ESO studentship. And basically what we did in this work was to analyze a sample of 73 UV spectra, very high quality, so very high resolution and signal to noise, of bright giant disk stars. So these were all in the disk, quite bright. And these stars were pre-selected thanks to apogee, and were selected to cover a wide range in metallicities. And in addition, these stars are also K2 fields. So we have astroseismic information, and thanks to astroseismology and the high precision abundances that we derive, we were able to build chemical age trends. So First of all, we derived atmospheric parameter. Here is the kill diagram of our targets and the metallicity range that we covered with that our stellar sample covered. And we derive ages using a pipeline called BASTA that basically takes as input spectroscopic information, but also information from astroseismology, namely the maximum frequency, Numax, and the frequency separation. So here you can see the age distribution with the relative error of our age. And what you see here in pink, it's part of our sample that unfortunately I had to discard because this star was really too old, like unphysical age. And some of them were also the more metal poor. We know that for metal poor ages are very tricky. So I think that I thought it would have been better just not to have stars older than the universe in our analysis. So they won't appear in the next plots. But so basically to study the dependencies on chemical ratio on metallicity was to take our total sample and divide it into 3 different metallicity bins: a solar, as a group with solar metallicity, an intermediate group, and the most metal poor group. So then we basically started to plot the well-known chemical clocks versus age, and basically derive fitting linear relation for the 3 groups. What is it visible here that for the solar group, the more metal-rich one, our slope compares very well with studies that are we derive from literature. But if we start to look at the mixed group and poor group, then we see, first of all, that we kind of deviate from literature, and most important, that our slope start to get flatter and flatter. We repeat this type of exercise. Sorry, this plot is very overwhelming, but basically what you see here, it's basically the same exercise I just showed to you, but for different neutron capture over alpha combination. We chose neutron capture and alpha elements for the reason that I told you at the beginning, for the different production time scale. So in each row, you will have a different neutron capture elements over a different alpha elements. And we basically fit linear relation to the 3 different metallicity bins. And what we found in general was that for the solar group, or like the most metal-rich group, we had quite strong relation, but these relations were kind of disappearing when with decreasing metallicities. This is very well reflected, for example, if we look at the first peak, or what we call light as process elements, and as strontium, yttrium, and zirconium here, for example, and the fact that these slopes change from one metallicity bin to the other, it's because of the metallicity dependence of the stars itself. Because, for example, this group of elements is heavily dependent on metallicity, and higher is the metallicity of the stars, higher is the production of these elements. And therefore, when we jump to the more metal poor bin, this ratio is kind of losing its slope. This behavior is less visible when we go to another group of S-process elements that are called the second peak of heavy elements. These elements are known to be less dependent on metallicity, and in fact the slopes are more similar, sorry, the 3 linear regression fits are more similar one to the other with respect to these 3 type of elements. So here what we see, it's for sure a dependence on the metallicity of the star itself, but this is not only it's not the only factor that is playing a role in changing the slope from one group to the other. We kind of saw the same behavior for another chemical abundance ratio, where we compute a S over a slow over a rapid process elements. And as rapid, I was just able to measure europium. And then we also measure slow over vanadium and aluminium. And europium, vanadium and aluminium, even they have more complex production channel, we can think that they are produced more or less as alpha elements in the sense of from massive stars and on short-term time scale. We see the same behavior that was in the previous plot, in the sense that usually the blue line, or like the solar metallicity bin, show the stronger dependence with age, even if for this chemical ratio, we kind of see a small change in the slope, meaning that there is a smaller dependencies on metallicities. So as I said to you before, there's a dependence of the metallicity of the star itself, but also here what it's playing in a role is that we have different sources that produce these elements, and as well we have a scatter that is due to our internal uncertainties that we kind of blur the relation with time. But we don't have to forget that these stars have been sampled from different parts of the galaxy, and therefore there's a huge influence from the radial migration, because if a star is formed in a zone where the star formation history was different than another area, then the star have been enriched differently. So even if we freeze, let's say, at a given age, we will see a scatter that is in fact produced by the fact that stars move and reflect, therefore, that in our galaxy, star formation are complex and diversified if we look from one part to the other. And this is kind of preventing us to extend the chemical tagging to a very extended area, and also then to very different metallicities. So this plot is basically a summarize of the plot that that were in the previous slides, because here you can see all the abundance ratio. And basically I computed the slope, the difference in slope between the more metal-rich group, the intermediate, and the more metal-rich group between the most metal-poor. And basically here the color coding follows the correlation coefficient. So we can see that even if some ratio, for example, if we look at the one with zirconium, show a stronger correlation with time, they are also some of the ratio that change more with metallicity, so that show the higher delta slope. So meaning that if we look to a specific bin of metallicity, or like a specific metallicity range, these elements, these chemical abundance elements, can be very informative, but they can also be at the same time very dependent on metallicity. So in this sense, they are not universal. And I think that we were not able to find, therefore, like a golden chemical ratio that is the one that we can use to derive ages. And we always need to be careful, therefore, when we want to derive ages through chemistry, because the choice will be very much dependent on the metallicity of the star. So if we have an extended range of metallicity, or a smaller one. And for example, we cannot forget the effect of radial migration that can blurry our relation of chemistry with age. So in this sense, chemical tagging is a very powerful tool, because we see that we were able to recover a relation with age, but it's not universal. So this cannot be applied everywhere and on different metallicity range. And to this project, follow the project that's basically I'm working on here with Anna, because the sample that I show to you, like the 73 UV stars, originally was 75. And we had 2 stars more that are here like marked. And these stars, so this was the original sample that it observed and that we worked on when I was at ISO for my project. But we had 75 stars, as I said. And these stars at the beginning were very normal. They follow perfectly in the relation, in the chemical relation as all the other companion. They were in the jazz, also looking in the Kiel diagram, they were falling as the other. But when I started to derive the heavy elements abundances, then these two stars were different. And so after we checked that I did not mess with my spectral analysis, then we agreed that these stars are obviously S-process-enaced. So we say we discard them for this work, but why we don't go and ask Anna, that she was also at ISO at the time, if they might be interesting to do another type of studies. And in fact, Anna convinced us that these are not just stars to discard because they ruin our chemical age relation, but these are probably binary stars, S-process enaced, that however are not classified as binary. So, and here it's where my field is, this is not really my field, but Anna convinced me though that these stars are very interesting because usually S-enaced stars, if they are S-enaced intrinsically, they should be AGB. And so they should be here, much more evolved than the giant stars I was looking at. So if they are S-process enaced, but they are in the giants regime, this means that they have been polluted. So they are in a binary system where the companion was former an RGB stars, and then it's now a white dwarf, and there was a mass transfer on our giant stars. And so basically what we're trying to do during this week is to make a full chemical characterization of those two targets and prove their binarity. Here is basically the same plot that was in the previous slide, but not just with my old UV sample, but compared with a well-known sample built by De Castro and Roritz of barium stars. So we don't have doubts that these are barium stars or like S-process stars, but we want to, in upcoming paper, really give a complete chemical analysis of these two stars that were discarded in the previous work. So for now, I cannot tell you more because it's too weak that we are working on this, but soon, we hope soon there will be a paper about these two stars. And now, I'm sorry, but we need really to change location. So I told you that my PhD is kind of a collage. So now I have to go back to actually my original PhD project that was about studying the Sagittarius dwarf galaxy. And so Sagittarius, we all know, that it's a very interesting system, not just because it's one of the biggest satellites of the Milky Way, but because it's an ongoing merger. So what we can still see, it's a core that probably was the leftover of the progenitor. And then we have two white stellar streams that wrap around the Milky Way. And what I'm studying is the core that is located at 26.5 kiloparsec on the opposite side of the galactic center. Sagittarius has been widely studied because of its protracted and very complex star formation history. So you can see here in the age metallicity relation of Siegel that there are different stellar populations hosted in the core of Sagittarius. We have an older and more metal poor one, and even a very young and metal-rich population was detected. So this is the product of the long tidal history that Sagittarius at the Milky Way, because Sagittarius is orbiting around the Milky Way. It has been affected by the tidal interaction. It has lost stars, but it also, the interaction with the Milky Way, it is what caused star formation burst in the galaxy, and therefore it's a perfect laboratory to study a dwarf system and at the same time how a satellite it is interacting with our galaxy. So as I said, it's interesting because it's a dwarf system, and dwarf galaxy, I think, are very interesting laboratory to study different type of metallicity yields and nucleosynthesis processes different from our galaxy. They are usually more metal poor. If we look at the metallicity distribution here from Salvadori. So when we look at the stars hosted in a dwarf system, sometimes we have kind of a window on earlier process. This is the same plot that it was in one of the initial slides. They behave differently from the Milky Way. They have different star formation history. And here it's very clear, where basically there's a schematic view of different star formation history for the Milky Way and three classical dwarf systems, Culture, Fornax, and Sagittarius. So basically, also chemistry trace different enrichment in this type of galaxy. So I started to study Sagittarius actually during my no. Wait, I cannot, but I can. What's my computer probably? I think I lost. Ah, no. Yes, was froze. I don't know. Sorry. My computer froze. So I started to study the Sagittarius system during my master thesis that I did under the supervision of Elsa Starkenburg, so the PI of Pristine. And in fact, I had a photometric approach for studying this galaxy because Pristine is a narrowband survey that is targeting the most metal poor stars in the Milky Way and around. And it uses a narrowband filter that it's centered around two very specific spectral lines, the calcium HK lines that are sensitive to metallicity. So Pristine was able to find a huge amount of metal poor candidates, around 2 million. And now there's like even a public catalog where basically photometric metallicity have been computed for around 30 million of stars with Gaia broadband photometry. But Pristine has a sub-survey, which is called Pristine Inner Galaxy Survey, that it's targeting the inner galaxy, and that also it has some fields over the Sagittarius region. And here you can see in orange square the fields where we have metallicity sensitive photometry for Sagittarius. And on top of that, there have been a follow-up where around 400 spectra, low and intermediate resolution spectra have been collected in the Sagittarius region. And those are the red circle. So I started to study the Sagittarius using photometry. So basically what we did was to build a metallicity map, but metallicity was not a spectroscopic map, but let's say what we did was to derive, thanks to the photometry, the population of Sagittarius into metal poor and metal rich stars, and basically looking at the variation of these two populations along the footprint. So we divided the Sagittarius into rings, and we compute the ratio of these two populations, so moving along the semi-major axis. And what we found, that you can see also here in this metallicity map, that the relative number of metal poor stars grows when we move from the center towards the outskirts of the galaxy. So this might give an hint about how Sagittarius formed stars. Probably it's an outside information process where the most metal poor stars formed earlier in time. They were less centrally bound, and they've been also more heavily affected by the interaction with the Milky Way. So they had time to spread, to be taken apart from the center. On the contrary, a more metal-rich population would have formed later in time in the center of the galaxy, due possible to infall of gas happening at the passage of Sagittarius around the Milky Way, and therefore these gradients in metallicity could have produced. But it's not trivial to disentangle like the properties of the progenitor of this galaxy from what it has been caused by the interaction with the Milky Way, because for sure internal and external factor here played a role in shaping the metallicity distribution of Sagittarius. So to answer better this question, we thought that we need more chemical information. So if we look at what we have, it's available for the Sagittarius core, we have the metallicity from peaks that here is called AAT, so the low mid resolution, that are around 400 stars, 400 stars, and it cover nicely the more metal poor ends of our galaxy. Then I observed other 12 stars with higher resolution using Mike spectrograph at Las Campana Observatory to, let's say, having a higher resolution follow-up of just very metal poor ends of the AAT distribution. And this data have been recently published by Federico in a paper where basically they provided the largest chemical analysis of the very metal poor tail of the galaxy. And what we found in this work is that at these low metallicities, we are not still able to see the knee of our galaxy, which is expecting also compared to the values that were found in literature, but we were able to, let's say, try to derive at least some of the chemical enrichment channels that played a role in Sagittarius. So we found a combination of supernova type 2, but also to explain the chemical pattern that we found in this work, AGB are needed and let's say had played a role in the chemical enrichment of Sagittarius. So Sagittarius was enriched by supernova type 2, at least at this lower metallicity, but also there was a higher contribution on AGB stars. Then if we move to another metallicity regime, and I'm talking always about the core of Sagittarius, I'm not studying the streams, so this picture would be different if we would look at the Sagittarius stream, but this is always for the core. We have the data from Apogee that observed fields in Sagittarius, much more meta-enriched than the AAT spectra, and then there are around 40 measurements in high resolution that are available from the literature. So to those, we add 100 spectra that we observe with flames. And flames, of course, is a multi-object spectrograph, and the field that we were able to observe with flames, it's very much in the core, in the central part of the core of Sagittarius, because the cross here, it's the nuclear stellar cluster M54. We observe the stars here that we selected thanks to Gaia astrometry to be sure that we had members. And for those stars, since before we did not have any spectroscopic information, so metallicity information, we selected them using the pristine metallicity sensitive. So we kind of have an estimate, a photometric estimate of their metallicity. But then at the first analysis, this is the metallicity range that we actually cover the blue data with these measurements. So this will be my last project of the PhD that I hope to finish in the 6 months that I have left. And so what I'm planning to do, so first of all, I started deriving atmospheric parameter for those stars. We are in the giants regime. This is the spectroscopic metallicity that we are covering. And basically, based on the quality of the data that I have, I will try to derive as many chemical abundances as I can. So to really try to have a different, like a complete chemical characterization of the population that are housed in the core of Sagittarius. This is one of the first plot that I did, where I measured magnesium to have an idea of the Ni. So we, differently from the work of Federico that was looking in this metallicity, now we see an E, and that is comparable with another high resolution work in the literature from Mucciarielli. And then I'm starting to measure different chemical species. The blue are always my points, and here are, apart from the yellow points, the other are all high resolution measurements that are available in the literature. And you can see that for many elements that for me are the most interesting one, for example, the neutron capture, we are not really able with this quality of data to measure these elements for all the stars. In fact, I have basically barium or europium for around 10 stars. I was able to measure lanthanum for basically all the stars in our sample, while for the iron peak and the alpha elements, for those elements that are usually the elements that in the optical have more lines, I have more measurements. So what I intend to do with this pool of data is to compare my chemical trends to other massive substructure, the LMC, the GS, and also we hope to be able to derive age for these stars, to really like kind of build a chemical, or maybe not do a complete chemical evolution, but at least characterize from a chemical point of view the color of the galaxy. So this was my last slides, and here are my conclusion. So this is basically the two big projects that I did in my PhD. So one about the chemical tagging, where we saw that chemistry is very powerful. We just need to be sometimes cautious in if we want to use it to derive stellar ages. And if its chemistry is very cool in our galaxy, I think it's even cooler when we use it for studying satellite systems. And we can, for Sagittarius, now we are really assembling an high resolution sample for the metal pure tail, but as well with the flames data, even with less, it's like kind of a less high quality spectra, but still high resolution. We can mapping a considerable like amount of stars in the core. And this is the question that I'm still trying to work on in my PhD, but I'm sure that more data that are coming will help me in answering these questions. And I thank you for the attention.
Questions for Sara?
Thank you, Sara. Even being still a PhD student, I think the work you have shown is reflecting much more senior status. So congratulations. My question is about your first project about stellar ages and chemical traits. I was wondering, given the high C-Newtons ratio and the really high resolution you get from your EU-based sample, have you tried to measure radioactive nuclides, say thorium or uranium?
Yeah, so this is also, it's something that now we are kind of reflecting with for these chemical peculiar stars. So no, for this sample here, we really like limited ourselves to the classical ratio S alpha. I think because we were really trying just to see well-behaved elements. But with Anna, we are trying to derive more, it's like even heavier elements that can help us in constraining the evolution state, for example, of these two chemical peculiar star and their companion. So we are trying to at least get these elements that I can have neobium and maybe also some of the elements you mentioned. But for those, no, because we were trying to get chemical abundances that we can trust a lot to have the higher precision we could to fit these trends with age. So we kept only I measured more elements, but we kept a well-behaved one.
I see. Thank you.
One question I was thinking about this, you compare at the beginning with the work that Nissen did.
Yes, that is solar.
There was really tight correlation between
This
some
one.
ratios
Yeah.
and of course Nissen had several
Solar.
tricks.
Yes.
One was that the stars were solar analogs.
Yeah.
It was the golden easy
Yes.
to compare them. Also the limb population was looking at was very limited in metallicity and distance, but also he did this trick of doing a differential analysis line by line, which in your case you have a much broader range of effective temperatures. It's much harder, but did you do something like that, or was
we did differential analysis. I mean, I'm sure, as you said, so we had a broader atmospheric parameter space. So what we did was to divide, let's say, as you would imagine here, bins, and for each group of stars with similar metallicity and log G, we took a reference stars, and then what I did was to compute line by lines differential analysis. The problem that for some stars, then let's say when the bins we had few stars, because it was not even like we did not have exactly the same number of stars for each bin, but we applied kind of a differential analysis. So we took a reference stars that would be similar in temperature and log G in parameters to our, and did a line by line, at least to correct the systematic errors in our spectral analysis and be more precise.
Thank you. So maybe I miss it, but for the two stars that you are analyzing now with Anna, do you want to just constrain if they are binaries, or do you want to infer properties? You know already that they are binaries and you want to constrain properties for these binaries?
Yeah. So first of all will be, I think, the first step. So now that we are sure that these stars are not binary, so we know that are binary because with Anna and Dite, we check the spectral energy distribution function, the RV variability. So we're quite sure that are binary. So I think that this is something that you are still defining. So first step will be just to present two new barium stars. I know that there are nothing great because there's already out there like a sample of barium star. No, just to, we were first of all, I think, surprised that they are bright, so very easy to spot, but they were not somehow flagged or presented in the usual S process in ACE catalog of stars. And then, so we would like at least to constrain, like if they are with some specific chemical combination, at least we can say something more about if they are pure as processed, if they've been like in between S or R process. So we already think that these are pure as processed stars that received mass from a binary. So I think would be from one side, present them in general literature, adding them to whatever catalog of barium stars, and then maybe give just let's say insight about their specific nature. So how is this companion and how they form.
Thank you.
More questions? I think that's it. Sorry. Who did I miss? Sorry.
Hello. Very nice. I would like to ask why, in the first part about the chemical clocks, Can't you just include iron also as a parameter in the fit?
Yeah, you mean in the fitting?
Yeah, or just include all the measured abundances in the fit and then derive an age.
Wait, you mean?
You're deriving these slopes, but maybe you just fit for, you get a more precise age when you just combine all these potential clocks.
So you mean to add the iron in the abundance ratio as a like another
Like a second parameter.
yes. So first, if I understood well the question, so we did not use just iron here because of the dependencies. I think that so if we look at the like iron age, it would be like very more scatter plot, not like a age metallicity relation. Then if it's a question if we used iron as a parameter in the fitting, yeah, so this work, it has been done. So I think in a point I did like put iron as a free parameter in my, but I did not find like much of like a difference in the slope. And also I think that this would have been really important if we wanted to provide like a calibrating relation, like a formula where you can use your iron to derive or your chemical abundances to derive a age. There, I think that including iron would have been much more accurate. But since we did not want to provide like a age calibration formula, but just to really make a study of the like the change in metallicity, I think like not including iron, but doing this division in metallicity bin was effective to.
But in the end, that's what you want. You want a chemical age, or at least that's what people want.
Yeah, at least. But also we say that we don't provide like, okay, we provide the yttrium over magnesium, our relation, but we also saw that the factor that play a role are like so much that giving one formula would have
Yeah,
been.
but maybe if you combine all these elements together.
Yes, but
that has also been done.
yeah, again, I think that was not really the purpose of giving the age. And in the literature, there are already this type of work that you said, including iron. It's like the multivariate fitting. It's in Casali, for example, the studies. So there's formula that include iron to compute your age.
And then how sure are you that this has to be just one slope? Couldn't it be also?
Yes, could have been a yes, like a. I mean, it's not bit a linear regression fitting, but another type of function as well. Yes, we restrict ourselves to, let's say, the most simple panorama, so scenario as alpha and a linear regression. But again, also in work, the fact of using like different function, but linear fitting, it has been explored and could be more effective.
Anyone else? Let me check if there is someone online. Yeah, I think that's it then. We can thank Sara again.